James, the CEO wants to talk to you, and Michael is with him too. It seems you're finally being let go. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. As I headed to the CEO's office, through the elevator in the hallway, I was engulfed in gloom. When I entered the CEO's office, just as my subordinate had said, Mr. Smith and department head Michael were there. "You don't fit in our company, you're fired." Hearing this sudden dismissal from Mr. Smith, Michael, sitting beside me, raised the corners of his mouth, bursting into a smile of joy. But then, are you perhaps misunderstanding something? The true nature of this dismissal that he revealed next was shockingly unexpected. I am James. This year, I turned 37, just an ordinary company employee. I now live in a corner of New York, originally from a rural area in Idaho. Maybe it's because I was nurtured in a generous and leisurely countryside environment. Though it's a bit odd to say about myself, I've never been able to become as cool and detached as city folks, always siding with those in trouble or in a weaker position, a man of deep compassion. I went to school in rural Idaho until high school and then attended a mid-tier private university in New York. During my college years, I worked various part-time jobs and eventually got a job at an IT company, T-Tech, which at the time was barely more than a startup. Before I knew it, 15 years had passed as I struggled and worked at this company, and I've reached this age. The company, which was small when I joined, has grown into a mid-sized IT trading company. As a mid-level manager and the head of the system development section at our New York headquarters, my work environment is far from ideal, to say the least. Being a head in name only, I'm constantly caught between the demands of my superiors and the needs of my subordinates. A classic example of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. Especially among my subordinates, many are from prestigious universities, making them generally difficult to handle. Among them, some subordinates have very high self-esteem and self-confidence, and they are very assertive. Therefore, as a mediocre supervisor with a significantly lower educational background than theirs, I often sense their defiance and mockery towards my instructions, even if they don't express it openly. In other words, they look down on me as their head. Moreover, my direct superior, the head of the system development section, Michael, is a typical opportunist who climbed the career ladder just by being savvy. Michael tends to delegate tall, important, or complex tasks to his subordinates, leaving everything to others while he takes all the credit for himself, a deceitful superior who only wants to reap the benefits without putting in the work. These troublesome subordinates and superiors are mostly from the prestigious private university, K University, forming an unbearable internal university clique. Michael often says to me, "James, your alma mater, N University, is like the typical fallback university for us K University graduates, isn't it? It's sad. You must be harboring such a complex, it's scary." Michael would say this out loud, ensuring I hear it, and then the subordinates from K University would laugh mockingly at me, even though it wasn't funny at all. Indeed, N University, my alma mater, is not highly ranked and is considered a safety school for students aiming for prestigious universities like K University. I, too, had applied to prestigious universities but ended up at N University as my safety option, so Michael's sarcastic comments often struck a chord with me. In this hostile office environment, my oasis was Elizabeth, who recently started working as a cleaner in our office. Elizabeth, not yet accustomed to her job, often made mistakes and seemed lost on the floor, which led to some mean-spirited younger employees clicking their tongues or harassing her openly. However, as I mentioned earlier, being raised in the countryside has instilled in me a nature that can't ignore those in vulnerable positions. Gradually, I found myself discreetly helping Elizabeth when she seemed to be struggling with her cleaning tasks, and started to strike up friendly conversations with her. Elizabeth wore a large cleaner's hat pulled down over her eyes and a big mask, making it hard to see her face, but she seemed to be quite elderly. She warmed up to me as I helped her out and started making small talk, sharing stories from her life that were both interesting and insightful. Indeed, the stories from Elizabeth, who has lived through many years and is a senior in life, were interesting and full of wisdom. In the midst of the hostile work environment that left me feeling on edge, the casual chats with Elizabeth gradually became an irreplaceable form of relaxation for me. However, my subordinates in the system development section, especially those in the K University clique led by Michael, openly mocked us. Seeing me, with my lower education, happily chatting with the cleaner Elizabeth, they would say loudly enough for us to hear. Low-educated old man and an old lady, perfect match at the bottom. On one such day, after working late at the office and feeling completely drained, I finally made it to the nearest station to my company. As I passed through the ticket gate and was descending the stairs to the platform, a wallet flew out of the bag of an elderly woman walking slightly ahead of me and fell to the ground. However, the elderly lady didn't notice and continued to hurry towards the platform. I immediately made my way through the crowd, picked up the fallen wallet, looked up, and frantically searched for her. To my relief, I found her already lined up at the boarding area of the platform. It was a platform for a train heading in the opposite direction to mine. I need to get this wallet back to that elderly lady quickly. In the midst of the rush hour crowd, I hurried down the stairs to the platform as fast as I could, but unfortunately, the train was already pulling in. The train doors opened all at once, and the elderly lady boarded. No choice, it's going the opposite way, but I'll have to get on that train. Desperate, I raced down the stairs and barely managed to slip through the doors just as they were closing, boarding the train heading in the opposite direction to my home. Once on, I found the train packed to the brim with commuters. I had seen the elderly lady with the lost wallet board the next car over. I have to get this wallet to her before she gets off. While receiving some annoyed looks and tuts from other passengers, I apologized profusely and slowly made my way through the crowded car towards the next one. By the time I reached the elderly lady's car, 2 stations had passed. As I quickly explained how I found her wallet and came to return it, the elderly lady looked incredibly surprised. Though she appeared quite elderly, she seemed energetic and had a kind, refined face. What struck me was how her eyes widened in shock the moment she saw me. "You are such a kind person, to go out of your way to return a lost wallet by boarding a train going in the opposite direction of your home." The elderly lady was so moved, thanking me repeatedly, that I became embarrassed and modestly replied, "Oh, it was nothing. Just doing what anyone would." Just then, as the train was stopping at the second station, I said, "Well, this is my stop," and bid the elderly lady goodbye before hopping off the train. Having taken the train in the wrong direction, I decided to wait on the opposite platform for a train going back the way I came. That's when something strange occurred to me. How did that elderly lady know I took the train in the opposite direction? Despite not having mentioned anything about myself, the elderly lady somehow knew I had taken the train in the opposite direction to return her wallet. Life is full of mysteries. With a puzzled shake of my head, I boarded the train home. The next day, as I arrived at work as usual, my colleague Brian rushed over to my desk. "James, thank you so much. The proposal you advised me on last week, I presented it as you instructed, and we got the contract. And this morning, Mr. Smith personally called me in to commend me for it, all thanks to you." Honestly, I had always thought Brian was one of those who looked down on me with a bad attitude, so his sudden change took me by surprise. I had advised Brian on numerous occasions, and this wasn't the first time a deal had gone through, but it was the first time he had expressed gratitude and thanked me like this. Was being praised by Mr. Smith personally really such a game changer? Sensing my skepticism, Brian added, "Yeah, James. The reason I came to thank you is that he told me to. He said, this successful deal is thanks to James, a competent and exemplary supervisor. Make sure you thank him properly. Watching Brian walk away, I muttered to myself, why would he? That day was just the beginning, and from the next day on, the atmosphere around me at work began to change significantly. Without altering my work style or approach from the previous week, good news and results started coming my way one after another. Specifically, one of our long-standing clients approached us with a proposal to embark on a major project together. And to my surprise, they nominated me as the person in charge from our company. Having worked here for about 15 years, this was the first time I had been specifically requested for a project. In the past, even if I did high-quality work, someone else always seemed to take the credit or obstruct my efforts. It felt like I had gone from being a symbol of misfortune to someone basking in the limelight. I asked Jessica, the client's representative, why she chose me as the contact person for our company, despite there being other employees available. Jessica replied, it was because Mr. Smith recommended you. He assured us that if it's James from the System Development Department, there can be no mistake. We took the liberty of looking into your past achievements and, true to his word, found you to be an exceptionally capable individual. I was taken aback to hear once again that he had played a role in this. And so, my once luckless corporate life seemed to be taking a turn for the better recently, lifting my spirits and making me grin to myself. Being appointed as the person in charge of an unprecedentedly large project from a client filled me with enthusiasm, and I dived into the preparations. This project was undoubtedly the biggest opportunity in my career, and its success would significantly enhance my reputation. I was brimming with motivation. Day after day, I stayed late at the office, fully focused on preparing for this project. Creating specifications for the newly developed program, drafting various explanatory documents, preparing for presentations. I was giving it my all, drawing on every bit of strength I had. After a month of such dizzyingly busy yet fulfilling days, the final presentation, where I would meet all the clients, was just 2 days away. After tirelessly working through sleepless nights, I managed to complete the new system and nearly finished the specification documents and the extensive materials for business negotiations by yesterday. On the day before the presentation, I arrived at work, trying to contain my excitement, and launched the newly completed system for a trial run. Then, I tried to open the specification document files stored on my PC, along with other files for the business negotiation presentation. But they were gone. All the files had been deleted. Moreover, all the backup files I had made as a precaution were also erased. Even more, all the documents I had printed out and piled up next to my PC just the day before had vanished without a trace. This can't be happening. What on earth is going on? I felt a chill run down my spine and couldn't help but shout out loud. In a panic, I searched under my desk and in my drawers, desperately looking for the stacks of documents, but they were nowhere to be found. As I was doing this, drawn by my earlier shout, some people came over, laughing uproariously. When I turned towards the source of the crude laughter, there were Michael and his entourage, looking down on me with scorn. Too bad. All those documents you worked so hard on and the files on your PC, this guy threw them all away. Michael, seemingly finding the situation hilarious, intimately burst into laughter, pointing at David, a junior employee. David was a newcomer, but like Michael, he was from K University and had a nasty personality, acting like Michael's lackey. I thought your files and documents were garbage just like you, so I deleted all the files along with the backups, and threw all the paper stacks into the shredder bin. As David made his flippant remark, Michael and the rest of the group burst into uncontrollable laughter. Haha, it's hilarious, right? Threw them all away. Haha, now James can't do his presentation. Bye-bye, business deal. Oh dear, Such a big project gone to waste. What a pity, poor thing. Michael and his cronies mocked and tormented me, making a laughingstock out of me. Glaring at Michael and David, who had deleted the files, I said, "Do you have any idea what you're doing? Aren't you ashamed of yourselves for stooping to such despicable actions?" To which David brazenly replied, "Not at all. We have to nip in the bud any bad influence from our incompetent senior, or it's us, the juniors, who end up getting crushed." Haha, getting told off by the newbie. Hut, James, you've been getting a bit too cocky lately because you've been recognized a bit. You were an eyesore, so we just gave you a reality check. Go ahead and embarrass yourself in the business meeting and revert back to your mediocre self. And don't you dare get ahead of yourself ever again. Michael, seizing the moment, vented his true feelings. Hearing Michael's appalling words, I realized everything. Michael, the department head of system development, was deeply resentful that I, a mere supervisor, had been appointed by the client for a big project, bypassing him. I felt his actions were clearly driven by ugly jealousy towards me. Stunned by their actions and responses, I was left speechless as Michael, with a parting shot of "Let this be a lesson. Never overstep again, you worthless supervisor," walked away with his entourage from my desk. As I watched their retreating figures with a sense of despair, I muttered to myself, all the backup files were deleted, and all the documents were thrown away. I could start over from scratch. But there's absolutely no way I can finish before the day after tomorrow's business meeting. It's all over. How could I have been so careless? I blamed myself for leaving my PC unlocked and for carelessly leaving the documents by my desk, feeling a sense of futility in hindsight. The next day, I went to work feeling utterly despondent. With the business meeting now seemingly doomed, my spirit hit rock bottom and I was overwhelmed with depression. Barely able to stand. Unable to focus on work, I went to the break room alone, repeatedly sighing and holding my head in my hands. Embarrassingly, I felt a lump in my throat from my own inadequacy. Then, someone patted my shoulder. Looking up, I saw Elizabeth, the cleaner, looking at me with concern. "Ah, Elizabeth, sorry, I'm not really in the mood for small talk right now." As I said this, Elizabeth smiled kindly with just her eyes showing, then presented something she had been hiding behind her back. To my astonishment, it was the stack of documents I had printed out, which were supposed to have been thrown away by David. The specification documents for the new system, the materials for the presentation, and all the documents for the business negotiations were all there, intact. "What, Elizabeth, where did you find these?" Surprised, I asked, and Elizabeth replied, "The day before yesterday, when I was collecting trash, I found a large stack of documents in the bin for shredding, which isn't usually there. It seemed odd, so I checked and saw they were the documents you'd been working so hard on every day. I thought to myself that I couldn't let such important things be shredded, so I collected and saved them all right there." At that moment, Elizabeth appeared to me like a saint. "Elizabeth, thank you so much. With these, I can go ahead with tomorrow's presentation and negotiation. You saved me at the last minute. You're my savior, Elizabeth. Thank you." Overwhelmed with gratitude, I couldn't help but rejoice, and Elizabeth watched me with a pleased expression, nodding repeatedly as she spoke. "What goes around comes around. You're my savior, after all." Faced with Elizabeth's cryptic remark, I looked at her in bewilderment, only to see her chuckle amusingly in response. The following day, I was able to attend a presentation for the big project we were working on with our client, and thanks to the documents, I managed to conduct a successful presentation. The subsequent negotiations also ended in great success, leading to contracts with several major client companies. It turned out to be one of the largest deals in the history of my company, T-Tech. Elizabeth, thank you. The negotiations were a huge success thanks to you. I wanted to share this great success with Elizabeth, who had saved the documents, before anyone else. When I happily arrived at work the next day, I was greeted by David, one of Michael's spiteful followers. David said to me with a sneer, "James, Mr. Smith wants to talk to you, and Michael is joining him. It seems, James, you are finally being let go." Still buzzing from the success of yesterday's negotiations, David's words felt like a cold shower. Just when I thought I was finally in a position to shine, my joy was short-lived, and now I was being fired. David mentioned that Michael was also in the CEO's office. Probably, Michael had framed the deletion of my files as a result of my mishandling. That must have led to discussions of my dismissal due to a supposed lack of confidentiality management skills. I guess I'm just an unlucky guy. With a heavy heart, I made my way to the CEO's office, pondering over these thoughts in the elevator and the hallway. I knocked and entered the CEO's office. Upon entering, just as David had said, Mr. Smith and Michael were there. "Ah, James, you've come. Take a seat." Mr. Smith gestured for me to sit. Then, unexpectedly, he said, "You're not suited for our company. You're fired." I thought to myself in shock, "This is so sudden," and screamed internally. Hearing Mr. Smith's abrupt announcement, Michael, sitting next to me, grinned with joy. Although I was prepared for the worst, the injustice of it all filled me with an unbearable sense of frustration, and I couldn't help but question Mr. Smith. "Mr. Smith, I'm fully aware that I haven't performed perfectly. I apologize. However, I have always worked diligently for this company. Isn't a sudden dismissal too harsh? Could you at least explain the reason?" Cutting off my plea, Mr. Smith said, "Hold on, James. It seems you're misunderstanding something. I wasn't talking about firing you." "What?" I exclaimed in surprise at Mr. Smith's unexpected response. "James, you're a treasure to our company. Firing you would be a loss for us. I was talking about firing Michael. You, Michael." At Mr. Smith's words, Michael was taken aback. "What are you saying, Mr. Smith? Why would you fire me, the manager, instead of this incompetent supervisor, James?" Even at this point, Michael didn't hold back his disdain for me. "It's quite the opposite. And Michael, why do you think it's only fair for you to be fired? You should know best, don't you? Come in now." Mr. Smith shouted towards the secretary's office. Then, the door to the secretary's office opened, and in came Elizabeth. Seeing her, Michael was the first to react angrily. "The cleaning lady, hey, we're having an important conversation here. Don't just barge in." Despite being yelled at by Michael, Elizabeth retorted, "Old lady, who do you think you're talking to?" With that, Elizabeth removed her mask and hat, which she never took off in public. Upon seeing her face, I couldn't help but exclaim, "Ah!" It was definitely a face I recognized. "It's you, the lady who dropped her wallet on the train that time." When I tentatively asked, Elizabeth smiled warmly and replied, "Yes, thank you so much for that time. Thanks to you, I didn't lose my important cash, cards, and driver's license. You're my savior." To think that the elegant elderly lady I encountered that time was the cleaning staff I chatted with every day. Seeing my speechless surprise, Mr. Smith added with a smile, "Indeed, James, I also want to thank you for returning my mother's wallet. Though belated, I appreciate it." It seemed Michael was the most shocked by Mr. Smith's words. "My mother? Wait, is this lady really your mother?" As Michael's face turned pale with shock, Mr. Smith reprimanded him sharply. "Watch your mouth, Michael. You've been slandering someone's mother by calling her an old lady. It's because of your twisted personality that you're utterly unfit for our company." Michael, scolded by Mr. Smith, began to tremble with fear, his face turning even paler. After giving Michael a disdainful glance, Elizabeth began to explain the situation. The details were as follows. The mother, wanting to contribute to her son's company in some way, decided to utilize her cleaning skills and began working as a cleaner. While working as a cleaner, she observed the office staff and their characters. During this time, Elizabeth was drawn to my work ethic and character. After the incident with the wallet, she had even suggested to her son that my promotion and performance evaluation be reconsidered. Moreover, Elizabeth had been keeping an eye on Michael's tyrannical behavior and had reported everything, including the truth about the negotiation documents, to Mr. Smith. That was the essence of it. During Elizabeth's explanation, Michael's trembling grew worse, and he eventually collapsed to his knees on the floor, completely overwhelmed. This was truly a sight of utter defeat. Looking down at the pitiful sight of Michael, Mr. Smith said calmly, "Michael, you are truly despicable. Today, you are being dismissed for disciplinary reasons, but before that, apologize to James for all the trouble you've caused him, if you have any shred of conscience left as a human being." Michael, crouching on the floor and holding his head, weakly looked up and said, "James, I'm sorry for all the mean things I've done." Watching Michael break down and sob, I felt a profound sense of pity. In the end, Michael's wrongdoings were brought to light, and the board of directors unanimously decided to dismiss him for disciplinary reasons. Michael left T-Tech, but his followers remained in the company. Ironically, the very next day, those who were part of Michael's faction came to me one after the other, apologizing for their past rudeness and insults. Following these events, I was promoted to the head of the system development department in the next personal change. Thus, peace returned to the department. The lesson from this entire experience was that those who extend a helping hand to others in need will find others willing to help them in their own times of need. Elizabeth repaid the favor of me returning her wallet with the significant act of saving crucial documents for a business deal. It was a true realization of the saying, "Kindness begets kindness." Half a year has passed since then. As the new department head, I continue to have a good relationship with Elizabeth, Mr. Smith's mother, who still works as a cleaner from time to time, and we often enjoy chatting together as a break from work. Now, with trustworthy subordinates and favored by Mr. Smith, I lead a smooth and successful life, a stark contrast to the unfortunate first half of my life. Oh my, it's been a while, but I recognized you right away because you still look as frail and scruffy as ever. Are you wandering around here because you are sick? At the hospital, I ran into a classmate who, for some reason, always disliked me in high school. You've always been weak-minded and incompetent, but to be physically weak as well is just the worst. How pitiful. Well, I'm actually your attending physician. Excuse me. My name is James. I work as a resident doctor at the hospital. Doctors are considered to be among the successful in this world, but as far as I'm concerned, that's not the case at all. The term successful probably applies to every doctor but me. Hi, Dr. Smith. How many children do you have? I'm still single. Mistaken for a married man by a patient, the hospital room was enveloped in an awkward atmosphere. Nurses, overhearing my conversation with the patient, struggled to suppress their laughter at the edge of my vision. Dr. Smith, you somehow look older. Is it because you're worn out? Isn't that a bit harsh to say in my face? Often mistaken for being older than my actual age due to my appearance, I frequently receive harsh comments from the nurses. Even though I became a doctor, my life is still far from luxurious due to my medical school loans. I'm in debt. So, the prospect of enjoying a meal out with a woman was out of the question, and the position as my girlfriend has been vacant for a long time. I must admit, I have a dull personality and simple thought processes. Fortunately or not, I rarely dwell on my misfortunes or unhappiness, managing to sleep off most concerns without it affecting my health. Even when I do notice, I think, I've lived this far without worrying. Why start now and just let it go? My family and friends often look at me with a mix of pity, calling me naive. However, I couldn't care less about other people's opinions. Even I, however, can't help but feel down when faced with the sharp words from the nurses who have both beauty and talent. They would say, "Dr. Smith, maybe you should take a shower, or it would be nice if a wife to take care of you would show up soon," offering nothing but harsh opinions. Even today, after a night shift, a colleague said to me, "You should shave your beard at least. It might make that face of yours look a bit better." Even with this face is unnecessary, I muttered to myself, but I follow everyone's advice, as usual, and continue down the path of an unattractive loser. One day, a nurse scolded me upon seeing my appearance. "Dr. Smith, it sets a bad example for the other staff if you don't take care of your grooming. It makes the patients uncomfortable." Looking in the mirror, I saw my hair was a mess from sleeping in. Rushing and without time to style my hair or shave, my appearance was far from commendable. Indifferent even to my own appearance, I spend my days being reprimanded by those around me. "Dr. Smith, please don't sleep here." "Yes, yes." Nearly dozing off with a cup in hand, I was jolted awake by the sharp voice of the head nurse, Emily. Though the coffee in the cup swayed, it fortunately didn't spill on my lab coat. Had I stained my coat, Emily would have scolded me again. Today, I was unexpectedly asked to step in for a surgery, which ended up taking a long time. As a result, I had to stay overnight at the hospital, and by the time I finished the paperwork I had planned to do, I was starting to feel extremely sleepy. I thought about taking a shower and having coffee to wake up, but the quiet of the almost empty break room was so soothing that I almost dozed off right there. Sorry, I just nodded off for a bit. If you keep zoning out like that, it could lead to an accident. Snap out of it. My apologies. Here you go. This is the file for your new patient. Please go over it. After getting a bit of a scolding from Emily as usual, I was briefed about the new patient. While flipping through the file, I came across a familiar name and frowned and thought, Is it a name you recognize? Seeing the patient's name and age, I found myself thinking back to an old classmate from long ago. Maybe I should go check on them. "Hey, you're off duty now, so please take off your lab coat. Otherwise, you might end up being given more work." Following Emily's advice, I quickly took off my lab coat and headed to the patient's room. Just before I reached the room, the patient came out and we bumped into each other head-on. Just as I recognized her immediately, she seemed to recognize me at once as well. She looked surprised at first, but then her face settled into the same mocking expression she had over a decade ago. Well, it's been a while, but you're still as scrawny and shabby as ever. I recognized you immediately. Are you loitering around here because you are sick?" She seemed to mistake me for a patient, looking at my worn-out, pajama-like clothes. "You are always weak-minded and incompetent, but to be physically weak too, that's just pitiful." She bombarded me with these harsh words, and I could only respond with a wry smile. Her name was Susan. She was a high school classmate, and although I don't recall ever doing anything to offend her, she had an intense dislike for me from our school days. It's possible I had said something insensitive, but we really had nothing to do with each other. We were in different classes and, under normal circumstances, would hardly have interacted. Yet, whenever our eyes met, she glared, and if I was nearby, she clicked her tongue. If I so much as broke a school rule, she would eagerly report me to the teachers. Back when I was more impulsive than I am now, I confronted her once when she glared at me. "Hey, did I do something to you?" That was the first time we ever spoke, and from then on, her hostility only seemed to grow. She completely ignored my question, as if my mere existence bothered her, and found fault with everything I did. She was the first in our school to get into a prestigious Ivy League university, and at the time, she was the talk of both the morning assembly and the staff room. Being openly disliked by her, a beautiful, smart, and responsible class president, meant that I was even told by our homeroom teacher to apologize for things I hadn't done. Even now, as adults, it seems her animosity towards me remains. Trying not to provoke her further, I carefully chose my words to clear up her misunderstanding. Actually, I'm your attending physician. What? Her face froze at my words. Didn't you know, my last name is Smith? I only sought a last name. I had no idea you were my doctor. I recognized you immediately. It seems you haven't changed your last name, so you're not married. I realized I had misspoken when the atmosphere around her turned icy. Susan's face morphed into a terrifying scowl, and by the time I realized I shouldn't have mentioned her marital status, she had turned her back on me in indignation and stormed back into her room. Left standing there, I was at a loss, shoulders slumped. I really messed up. Although I wanted to apologize immediately, the curtains were drawn around the bed, clearly shutting me out. I could already envision a complaint reaching the hospital and getting a severe reprimand from Emily. The next day, I resolved to apologize to her and headed to her room. I was bracing myself for a complaint from her, but surprisingly, there was none from her. However, that's not to say there was absolutely nothing. A nurse who happened to pass by and overheard the conversation reported it, and through a different route, I still ended up getting scolded by Emily. I guess I'm the guy who's not only unpopular but also unlucky. As I approached Susan's hospital room with heavy steps, I could hear a man's voice through the slightly open door. Just when I thought you could finally work at a decent place, this happens. I'm utterly disappointed in you. The harsh words from the man made me freeze in place. I've been subjected to various sarcastic comments, but I've never been spoken to with such coldness. Why can't you be like your sister? You always drag the family down with such shameful actions. The following woman's voice sounded distressed. It can't be helped. She's doing her best in her own way. Expecting more is just pointless. Another woman cut her off with a gentle voice. I checked the name on the hospital room again. It was indeed Susan's room. I didn't choose to be here. I could hear Susan's voice trying to argue back, but it lacked the usual forcefulness with which she criticized me. Her voice was small and trembling. All the things you do come back to haunt you, while your sister had job offers left and right even before graduating. You had to go through years of groundwork elsewhere, making detours before finally marketing yourself to get picked up. A disappointed sigh followed, and the words continued. It's shameful to see such a difference in capability between sisters who share the same blood. The father-like man said this, continuing to repeat similar sentiments. Peeking through the open door, I saw 3 people standing around Susan, who was sitting up in bed. Susan was biting her lip in frustration, her face downcast. Judging from the conversation, the 3 seemed to be her parents and sister. The way the words flowed out as they berated her suggested this was a usual treatment for Susan. To me, Susan seemed perfect, but it appeared her home situation was not. Even I, as oblivious as I am, could understand the situation in the room. Personal feelings aside, this is a hospital for the patients, and I am her attending doctor. I knocked vigorously on the door, not waiting for a response before opening it and stepping into the room. All 4 pairs of eyes pierced through me, but I'm not one to flinch at mere stares. Hi, I'm Dr. Smith, the attending physician. Nice to meet the family, and please, leave soon. Visits that burden the patient are not allowed. While the parents were taken aback, the sister quickly recovered from my surprise attack and started speaking boldly. What are you talking about? Are you saying it's not a problem for you to intrude on our family gathering? family gathering, blaming the sick for their illness, calling them disgraceful, saying they've always been the lesser one, and ganging up on a patient like this. That's a novel idea for a family gathering. My words seemed to unsettle them, with the parents exchanging glances. Yet, Kate, Susan's sister, continued to argue. We're family, and that's why we can say these things. It's for her own good. Kate, with a sticky, sweet smile, was about to say more when Susan cut her off with a cry. Stop it, what's for my good? You don't care about me at all. Susan must have been holding back a lot until now. Her patience seemed to have run out as she vented her frustrations on her family. No matter how hard I try, I've never been praised. This is wrong, something's missing. Kate did this, Kate was like that, Kate would have. I'm sick of it. Susan's voice was almost a scream by the end, causing her sister to retract her creepy smile and snort. It can't be helped. The truth is, you are inferior to me. Telling you the truth and making you understand your place is what families do. You really are a hopeless case. Kate sighed with twisted logic, and I felt a chill down my spine. But Susan, who must have been aware of her sister's abnormality, completely ignored her and glared at her parents. When Kate wanted a pet, you immediately got a dog for her, but when I brought home a stray kitten, you told me you'd given it away while I was at school, right, Mom? But then, a year later, my family-loving sister told me the truth. It wasn't given away. You had taken it to the shelter to be put down, and you didn't tell me right away because you knew I'd go looking for it. Susan's voice trembled slightly with tears, but after taking a deep breath, she continued calmly. You're right, Kate, I was a fool. I'm done seeking love from people like you. From now on, you don't have to think of me as family, and I won't think of you that way either, so please leave. Don't ever come back. Susan firmly declared her disownment. With that, her sister snorted. Then, from now on, even if you're in trouble, don't rely on us. I doubt anyone would want to help you. Fight your illness on your own. Kate spat out those words and left the hospital room with her parents. The room became silent once they were gone, returning to its usual sterile atmosphere. Days later, in the courtyard on a mild spring day, I approached Susan, who was sitting on a bench looking up at the sky. Hey there. She glanced at me briefly, keeping her face turned upwards. Since the day she broke ties with her family, her prickly attitude towards me had softened somewhat. But it hadn't disappeared entirely. I still got a sharp comment whenever we met. Are you sure it's okay to have such an unreliable doctor? That's a harsh way to put it. I'm worried I might catch some strange germs from this unhygienic doctor. Despite the harsh words, the nurses have been reassuring, saying that I'm competent, so there haven't been any formal complaints yet. But my mentality is certainly wearing thin. Ignoring Susan's reaction, I sat down beside her. Are you feeling nervous? I tried to speak as gently as possible. Susan's surgery was scheduled in 2 days. Even if it went well, she would need lifelong medication and occasional convalescence. I was much more nervous during my final job interview. Believe it or not, I had an offer from an international company. That's amazing. I was genuinely impressed, but Susan smiled self-deprecatingly. Well, I had to decline it because of my illness. My family was disappointed, and they lashed out at me. It was a mess. Far from receiving sympathy from her family, she was actually in such a situation. They probably blamed her more for declining the job offer rather than worrying about her illness. That's unfortunate, but with your talents, once things settle down, there'll be plenty of companies wanting you. When I tried to cheer her up, Susan fell silent for a moment before speaking. You've been a bit of help, you know. It was the first time she had mentioned what happened in the hospital room. Why did you help me? You thought I was a terrible person, didn't you? I'm your attending physician. After all, it's my job to put noisy visitors in their place. I put on a show of bravado. Honestly, I'm not usually that assertive. Back then, I really didn't want to intervene, and there was a chance I would have been talked down. If Susan hadn't declared her estrangement, it might have led to an ever-ending argument. I've hated you since high school. Really. It hurt to be told that directly, but I tried to remain calm. You weren't particularly good-looking or smart, always walking around confidently with your messy hair and wrinkled shirt. You were careless and insensitive, often upsetting teachers and girls. She spoke in a flat voice, recounting my embarrassing past. I try to live without dwelling on the past, but remembering it now is cringeworthy. My self-esteem was definitely taking a hit. But you always had people around you, and you got along well with your brother, who was a year ahead. No one really spoke badly of you to your face. Indeed, no one directly confronted me about my character. I had been scolded many times, but I also received plenty of praise. I must have had a fairly normal upbringing. I was trying so hard in that family, yet nobody loved me, and I couldn't get along with my sister. I always wondered, why is it so unfair? I would probably feel the same if I were in such a household. Then you appeared, seemingly without effort, having everything I wanted. You got along with your brother so naturally, and I resented you for it. That was the reason Susan had always been hostile towards me. Even though we both have siblings, what's the difference between you and me? Siblings. Even though I understood her reasoning, I still had to clear up a misunderstanding. Well, I don't know if it's okay to say this now, but my brother and I aren't actually blood related. What? Susan, who had been gazing up at the sky for a while, turned to face me for the first time. Her eyes were wide, possibly from surprise. Both my brother and I are adopted. Our parents are foster parents, and I could probably find out who my real parents are if I looked into it, but I've never felt the need to do so. Adopted, both of you? Yeah, we have other siblings too, all of them adopted. It's kind of like a collection, but to me, they are what I'd call family. How come you get along so well with your brother, just like a real family, even though you're step-siblings? It wasn't all perfect from the start. We've been through a lot, but overcoming those challenges, we've built a bond stronger than that of real brothers. I had no idea about any of this. Back then, we weren't exactly in a position to share such stories, you and I. For those close to me, our family's story was well known, but for Susan, who was unaware, it must have been quite a shock. After hearing my story, Susan looked down, her expression filled with deep thought. I'm really the worst. Being in such a privileged position, and yet harboring envy without knowing the full story, taking out my frustrations on you. I'm as bad as they say. She suddenly seemed to lose her confidence, which took me by surprise. Hey, don't get so down all of a sudden. You're scaring me. I'm just an unattractive girl anyway. It seemed my words struck a nerve, but it also revived her spirit as she glared at me. I'm always told I'll be fine on my own. That's what all you guys say. I'm just a woman unloved by her family or anyone else. While I felt a bit of empathy for her self-deprecation, I sighed in relief when I noticed someone in the corner of my eye. That's not true. Look, there's someone who cares about you right over there. Following my words and gaze, Susan noticed a middle-aged woman standing a short distance away. The woman, named Dorothy, had been a long-time housekeeper at Susan's home. She could be considered Susan's second mother, worried about her after her family stopped visiting and coming to take care of her during her hospital stay. She's a good person. She always asks me to take good care of you. Maybe you should consider her your parent, even if you're not related by blood. There you go, saying careless things again. When I made such a casual remark, Susan raised her voice in response. Then, standing up, she quickly walked towards Dorothy. Seeing Susan and Dorothy greet each other from afar, I waved back at them enthusiastically. To an outsider, Their easy and unreserved relationship might indeed appear to be that of a true mother and daughter. For someone like me, who grew up without parents, the concept of blood relation seems trivial. If there's mutual respect and affection akin to that of a parent and child, that's what I consider a family. As I absent-mindedly watched Susan and Dorothy enter the ward, the sound of the hospital's intercom system reached my ears. It's likely Emily is looking for me again. With a sense of resignation, I started walking as if to follow the two of them. I need to do my best as a doctor to ensure they can continue to enjoy their close relationship.
What is this place? It's so rural, it's not even funny. Too rural? I don't think it's that bad. I was born and raised in New York, you know? And you're taking me to this remote place? Calling it remote is definitely an exaggeration. I married you because I thought you were on a fast track to success. I don't know what you did wrong, but getting demoted to such a rural area. It's not a demotion. I've been entrusted with an important role in the company's expansion. No excuses. I don't need a husband who's been banished to the sticks. I want a divorce. 3 years later. Daniel? Ha? Standing there was my ex-wife, Brenda. And next to her, it was Brenda's affair partner, whom I had only seen in photos and videos. My name is Daniel. Right after I started working, I dated a woman. Her name was Brenda. She was a lively woman who spoke her mind clearly. She seemed straightforward and a bit strong-willed. But I admired her for that. Even in a male-dominated environment, she always expressed her opinions firmly. To me, she shone brightly. Our relationship gradually deepened, and before I knew it, we started dating. We were office sweethearts, and although people whispered behind our backs, "Don't worry about that. Just think of it as jealousy. We haven't done anything wrong, right?" She said that with a big smile, and she still seemed to sparkle somehow. Our relationship lasted for 2 years, and then I successfully proposed and we got married. Then, she brought up something. "I'm thinking of quitting my job." Eh? Are you planning to retire upon marriage? That's right. I don't think this job suits me anymore. I want to work part-time or maybe a casual job and take it easy at home. Honestly, we can manage with just your income, right? I want to quit. What do you think? That's fine. Don't worry about money. I'm on a career track and I think I can get promoted again next year. So, feel free to do what you want. Thanks. I will then. Daniel, you graduated from a great university and you're really good at your job. You're well regarded by your boss. If this continues, you might really climb the ladder quickly. That might be an exaggeration. But, on the inside, I thought so too. Work was fun, and I was genuinely happy when sales increased. There's a saying about finding one's true calling, and I truly believe that my job is just that for me. And so, she quit her job. I was proud of her as everyone celebrated her departure from the company. Half a year later, I was offered a transfer. The new location was at the headquarters, still in New York. When I told her, she exclaimed, "You're finally working at the headquarters. That means you're definitely on the fast track now. Keep earning more and more. Oh, by the way, our wedding anniversary is next month. How about we go on a trip abroad?" I can't just take leave next month. How about 3 months from now? For our anniversary, let's go to a fancy restaurant instead. Ah. If you can't do next month, I'm going to go on a trip abroad with my friends. What? I want to go soon. I can't wait 3 months. I'll buy you lots of souvenirs. Wait a minute. Weren't we supposed to go out together for our anniversary? Why are you planning to go with your friends? I just thought it would be nice if we could go together on our anniversary. If you can't make it, I'll just go on a trip abroad with my friends. You know. I don't want to say this, but haven't you been a bit reckless with money lately? Ha? It's not like I have spent all our savings, and you're making a decent amount each month, aren't you? Be a little more generous. What happened to working part-time or doing a casual job? You quit the part-time job, and now you're not working at all, right? It's just my salary. So, I'd really prefer you not to waste money. Don't you know what marital assets means? We're married, you know? Your money is mine too. I haven't spent a fortune. And you're making enough each month. Give me a break. If it were for things we both could use, I wouldn't mind so much. But it's all about your brand name bags, clothes, and accessories. And your trips are always with your family or friends, Brenda. If you're going to spend money, I wish it included activities that we could both enjoy together. You are busy with work right now. I'm trying not to get in your way. Plus, you tell me to get a job. But do you understand how tough it is to work part-time or casual jobs? It's not like being a full-time employee, you're treated like a pawn. It's really uncomfortable and stressful. But I want to save for our future too, maybe for when we have kids. Kids? I don't really think about having kids. Is that so? Before we got married, you talked about wanting 2 kids, so I just assumed. People change their minds. I've given it a lot of thought, and if we had kids, it would just mean more unnecessary expenses. I think it's better if we don't have kids and spend the money on ourselves instead. Anyway, just keep that in mind that I'll be going on that trip abroad with my friends next month. After quitting her job, she seemed to lose the sparkle I had once seen in her. No. Actually, it might have been that she only seemed to sparkle because that's what I wanted to believe. I thought I liked her straightforwardness and openness, but now, even that aspect of her personality was beginning to annoy me. Spending money freely and not working. When it comes to household chores, those are neglected as well. If money must be spent, I'd at least like it to be on outings or shopping trips we could enjoy together. But she goes on shopping sprees by herself, travels with friends, and squanders money. I was growing tired of her behavior. I pretended not to notice these feelings and started my new job at the headquarters. I've been transferred here as of today. My name is Daniel. Pleased to meet you all. I'm your supervisor and mentor, Susan. Feel free to ask me if you have any questions. Thank you. I'm looking forward to working with you. Working at the headquarters, I was even more devoted to my job than before. Boosting sales was enjoyable, and I learned a lot from my colleagues and bosses. Going to work became the highlight of my day, and returning home felt increasingly dreary. The reason was my wife, Brenda. Back from drinking again? It's almost midnight. Any complaints? It doesn't matter if I come home early or late, you're never around anyway. You're married to your job, aren't you? So I just went out for drinks with friends. Got a problem with that? It's not about complaining, but if you keep drinking late into the night so often, it's genuinely worrying. Maybe you should set a limit on how often you go out each week? What? Is this about money again? I'm not talking about money. You're just upset because if I go out drinking, it drains your savings, right? Despite earning a lot, you're so petty. I'm really just worried about you. If you're so worried, why don't you come home earlier? Have you ever thought about how I feel, being alone at home? But you always tell me not to come home early, instead, to work more for promotions, to earn overtime pay. That's why I'm always working late. I want you to earn more money. What you're saying makes no sense. I'm tired now. Let's talk about this some other time. Hey, wait. She had started going out to drink frequently at night. She wasn't like that before. Worried, I tried to come home earlier, but she pushed me to work overtime, to work harder for promotions, and discouraged me from coming home early. I was at a loss, unsure how to deal with her who changed so much. But, by seriously discussing these issues daily, she gradually stopped going out at night. I thought this would bring her back to the way she used to be. That's what I believed. Until that came up. After a year and a half of working at the headquarters, Susan called me. Did you call for me? There's something I need to discuss. Could you come to the conference room with me? Yes, sure. I'd like to hear your opinion. Yes? What about? What would you do if you were transferred again? Actually, I couldn't believe what followed those words. This decision would be significant for me. As I quietly listened to her, I finally spoke up. Well, Then, I went home to discuss it with my wife. Could you sit down? I have something important to discuss. What? Just sit down, please. Ugh. Fine, I'm sitting. What is it? Actually, there's a possibility of another transfer. Another transfer? Wait a minute, you've only been at the headquarters for just over a year, right? And another transfer now? Yes, but this transfer is significant. But you're currently working at the headquarters, right? A transfer from there means you're off the career track. No. That's not it. Calm down and listen. Until now, our company has only had offices in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, and Boston. They've decided to expand into new locations for business growth. Where to? It must be a decent-sized place, right? How far from New York? It's going to be about 620 miles away. What? Wait a minute. A transfer to such a place is unimaginable. You mean off the career track and into the boonies? It's not exactly a countryside, but compared to New York, well, it's not exactly urban. Do you have a rough idea of the place? Show me. I pointed to the general location on my smartphone's map app. What is this place? It's too rural, it's not even funny. Too rural? I don't think it's that bad. Sure, compared to New York, there might not be as many convenience stores or supermarkets. But the countryside has its charms. I was born and raised in New York, you know? You plan to take me to such a remote place. Calling it remote is definitely an exaggeration. Do you even understand why we got married? What are you talking about? I married you because I thought you were on a career track to success in a major company. A secure future, right? That's why I married you. So you didn't marry me because you love me? That makes it sound like you were only after my money. It's not like that, it is that. Given my age, I thought it was about time to get married, and if I was going to marry, I wanted someone younger and on a career track. You weren't bad looking and I believed in a secure future with you, but this is unbelievable. That's my line. When you got the job at headquarters, I was truly happy. I thought my judgment was right. But I don't know what you've done to be sent to the sticks. It's not a demotion. I've been entrusted with an important role in the business expansion. It's not about me making any mistakes. No excuses. I don't need a husband who's been demoted to the sticks. I want a divorce. So be it. Understood. Oh. You're surprisingly reasonable. I had a feeling this conversation might end up this way. Then I brought up another topic. You've been having an affair, haven't you? What? What are you talking about? The way you've been going out at night and frequently traveling raised my suspicions. I had a detective agency look into it. And there are plenty of photos and videos as evidence. It's fine if you want a divorce, but you'll have to pay alimony. What? Was that your last trump card? You thought mentioning alimony would stop me from divorcing you? Too bad. I can pay the alimony. Consider it payoff money. I have all those unnecessary brand items bought with your money, and my boyfriend works for a major company. He can pay the alimony in one lump sum. I see. Just make sure it's paid properly then. How easily humans can change left me more astonished than angry. Apparently, her affair partner worked for a major company and seemed financially secure. She was unapologetic about her affair, flippantly called it payoff money. That marked the end of our marriage. But I had no regrets. Continuing life with a woman who was reckless with money and unfaithful was out of the question. That was an obvious decision. And so, I readily agreed to the transfer. Really? You'll take the offer? Thank you. We'll start making formal arrangements. Oh, I forgot to mention. I'll be going with you to train you thoroughly. Really? I was worried about moving to a place with strangers. It's reassuring to know you'll be there. Top in sales and still worried? Did you manage to talk things through with your wife? We'll handle the housing arrangements. So if you have any specific requests. Actually, about that. I'm getting divorced. I haven't told anyone at the company yet, and I'd appreciate it if you could keep it a secret for now. So, a family-sized home isn't necessary, a singles type will do. Oh, I didn't know. I'm sorry for prying. No need to apologize. I was planning to tell you eventually. I hope this transfer isn't the cause, is it? She looked concerned as she peered at me. I wondered why she seemed so worried. The transfer isn't entirely unrelated, but there were various issues before that. I'm sorry. I never imagined it would lead to this. Why are you apologizing, Susan? When I received this assignment, I recommended you because I believed you would excel in a new environment. But I knew you were married and had a family, so I wanted to discuss it with you first. Thank you for your concern. But really, don't worry. The transfer is hardly related at all. Is that so? Then I'll take your word for it. I have high expectations for you as a subordinate. Yes. Afterward, I busied myself with the preparations for the move and the divorce proceedings. My wife moved out quickly and apparently started living with her affair partner. And the affair partner had paid the alimony in one lump sum. He really must be doing financially well. The smirking smile of Brenda flickered through my mind, and I shook my head. There's no point dwelling on it. I don't regret the divorce, and this was for the best. I moved and threw myself into my new job. The work there was challenging. Unlike before, where a foundation was already set, here I was part of building it from the ground up. It was fun and fulfilling, though often tough. Are you done with work? Want to go for a drink afterward? Yes. I was actually thinking of having a drink today. I'm pretty tired. Recently, Susan and I occasionally went for drinks after work. In a land where I had no family or friends, it was genuinely nice to have someone to drink with. Good job today. Thank you. You really work hard, don't you? People around here are surprised. They say working with you is motivating. Really? I didn't know anyone felt that way around me. Maybe they're too shy to say it? Everyone says seeing you work hard makes them feel like they can't lose. That they have to push themselves harder too. You have a knack for sales, but you also have a charisma that draws people in. Is that so? I'm a bit embarrassed to hear that. Susan, a work-oriented person, rarely gave direct compliments. Seeing her gentle smile, I felt my heart race. Maybe I've loosened up a bit from the drink? I thought being strict with you would make you grow, so I didn't compliment you much. But I do recognize your abilities. I wouldn't have brought you here otherwise. But I'm sorry if it caused trouble for your family. I've been meaning to tell you, but when I brought up the transfer, she said she couldn't come with me to such a place. I kind of expected it. So the divorce was because of this transfer? That's my fault, then. There were issues before that, like reckless spending and her not coming home until late at night. When I investigated, I found out about the affair. She probably didn't want to leave her affair partner. She even said I was being demoted. And claimed she married me for money. I'm actually grateful. If I had stayed at the headquarters, I would never have realized. That's such a shame. A kind person like you isn't easy to find. Really? She smiled at me. Her cheeks have turned pink from the drink. Embarrassed, I took a sip of my drink. From then on, working hard while occasionally drinking with Susan became a joy in my daily life. And before I knew it, 3 years had passed. That day, I had the day off and was at a high-end restaurant. Arriving a bit early, I took my seat and waited for someone. Just then, it happened. A familiar voice called out my name. Is that you, Daniel? See? I knew it was you. Have you come back to New York? Yeah, I have, I replied. Standing there was my ex-wife, Brenda, and beside her, the man I had only seen in photos and videos, her affair partner. Oh, what? Are you staring because of this? The wedding ring. We managed to get married. while you were working so diligently in the countryside. We tied the knot. That's good for you, I responded. Don't you have anything else to say? How does it feel? Abandoned by me, living a miserable life with nothing but your work? Are you even okay coming to such an expensive place? You don't have money, do you? After all, you were demoted and sent to the countryside. I keep telling you, I wasn't demoted. There's no need to lie. You always had too much pride. Brenda's husband smirked beside her. What a vulgar laugh. I thought to myself. Just then, the person I was waiting for arrived at the table. Sorry to keep you waiting. Who are these people? Hey, you can date even though you're a poor man? I don't know who you are, but you should probably break up with him. This man was demoted off the fast track and relegated to do menial work in the countryside. You'd be better off leaving him right now. Cut it out, I interjected. With all due respect, breaking up isn't so simple. Because, you see, we are married. We have no intention of divorcing, and frankly, it's none of your business, right? At those words, Brenda's eyes widened in shock. She had proudly shown off her wedding ring, yet she had failed to notice the ring on my left hand. Yes. In the 3 years since we parted, a lot had changed for me. I had married Susa N. And I had returned to New York. I put my arm around Susan's shoulder and greeted them cheerfully. This is my wife. Any problem with that? I never thought you'd remarry. It must have been tough finding a woman in the countryside. You keep looking down on the countryside, but what's so great about the city? Whatever. You wouldn't understand anyway. Besides, my husband is much wealthier. Right? Pleased to meet you. I'm Tyler, married to Brenda. I don't know what you did, but being dumped by your wife and sent to the countryside must have been tough. I couldn't have endured it. People who cheat aren't worth staying married to, I retorted. Hey, why don't you tell them where you work? They'd be shocked. Daniel's company might be big, but after all, he was sent to the countryside. I bet the salary is not that big. I'd rather not boast, it seems pitiful. But if I must, I work at Company XX. Oh? That company? Susan and I exchanged glances. Misinterpreting our surprise, the two of them laughed joyfully. Susan, who knew about my ex-wife, looked utterly baffled. It felt like her eyes were asking, why did you ever marry someone like that? I awkwardly avoided her gaze. Are you okay working there? Huh? What do you mean? Surprised because it's such a large company? I probably earn 3 times your salary. Please, stop with the sour grapes. Just because your husband can't earn much doesn't mean you should be envious. I'm not saying this out of jealousy. But aren't your company's performances declining? It's well known in our industry. Your turnover rate is skyrocketing, isn't it? I understand how you feel, though. What? You're making stuff up. There's no way your performance is declining, right? Right? Tyler's eyes widened in response to our words. His face expression seemed to ask, how do you know that? Brenda appeared uninformed and flustered. It was well known among us that XX Company, despite being a major corporation, had been gradually declining in performance. Amidst this downturn, an executive scandal came to light. Apparently, there was embezzlement by a senior executive. This caused the company's performance to drop further, and worried employees began leaving one after another. Yet, despite these issues, he boasted proudly. Likely assuming all was well simply because it was a major company, a typical attitude of someone who's just a regular employee. If I were in his position, I'd be worried enough to consider leaving the company. Moreover, in such a state, it would be difficult to brag about the company. Sure, it's a major corporation, but isn't it in quite a challenging situation right now? It's fine. It's a major corporation, it won't go under. Sure, our performance has dipped, but it will bounce back soon. Being a major corporation doesn't mean it can't fail, right? There are numerous precedents. Even if it doesn't go bankrupt, it could end up being absorbed or merged. What? Really? You said there were no problems and that work was going smoothly. Just relax. There's nothing for you to worry about. I've got it under control. Under control? Maybe the reason we can't go on trips lately and you haven't given me any money is because of this. You haven't shown me the bank account either. We're saving properly, right? It's fine. Even if we spend all our money each month, there's the bonus, and we'll start saving properly from now on. Wait, you mean you've been spending all our money each month? What have you been spending on when you earn that much? It's because you keep buying things. Most of my money goes to paying off the credit card bills you rack up. I can't believe this. You told me we had plenty of money and that I could spend it. Were you lying? In the middle of their escalating argument, Susan and I sighed quietly. Could you please go outside if you argue? It's really unpleasant to listen to. We came here to enjoy our meal, not to hear this kind of talk. Are you sure you can even afford to pay for this place? Hey, are you sure? My parents are helping out a bit with some money, so it's fine. Are they sending you money? Look, just keep it between yourselves. You're bothering other people here, and it's not fun to dine like that. Plus, if money's tight, maybe you shouldn't be spending it here? Hearing this, Tyler looked down, embarrassed. Brenda bit her lip, glaring at me. Tyler was younger than me and had a somewhat flashy appearance. I don't mean to judge people by their appearances, but he didn't seem like the type who plans and saves money. Such a man, married to Brenda, who was reckless with money. How their money was being managed. It was clear even without asking. Perhaps embarrassed, the two of them quietly left the restaurant soon after. Who would have thought we'd bump into them here? You had a knack for business, but maybe not so much in choosing partners, huh? Susan pouted a bit as she spoke. Since we started dating, I realized she could get quite jealous. Her pouting was endearing, making me smile. Although she seemed a bit upset at my smile, she couldn't help but smile too. 1 month later, I received this phone call. Hey, do you want to go out for a meal sometime? I have something I want to discuss with you. What? What's going on? We're both married now. Why do we need to meet just the two of us? I want to apologize for some things and I need your advice on something. Advice? Let me guess, you want to borrow money? Well, your husband's company is in trouble, right? I figured that out as soon as you contacted me. Yes, that's right. His company is really in a bad state, and he might have to quit soon. So, could you give back the alimony he paid? Give me a break. That's not up for discussion. Of course, I understand your feelings. But I'm not asking for it to be returned to him. I'm thinking about divorcing him. And I was wondering if we could get back together? Please. I realized after seeing you again that I really loved you. I took advantage of your kindness, and I did terrible things. I want another chance. Please. I have absolutely no feelings left for you. I cannot love you anymore, and I certainly won't betray Susan. But you answered my call. Doesn't that mean you still like me? What are you talking about? I had deleted your contact, so I didn't recognize the number. I was naive. I'll make sure to block you now. Wait a minute. At that moment, Susan snatched the phone from my hand. I hadn't noticed her listening in, but before I knew it, she had come up behind me. Could you please stop bothering my husband? He's too good for someone like you, who only sees money. If you cause him any distress, I will confront you fully. What are you talking about? If you harass or stalk him, I will consult my brother. He's a lawyer, so he can help us if needed. Oh, I'm sorry. I won't contact him anymore. I appreciate that. I have no intention of giving him up, and I certainly won't hand him over to someone who can't appreciate his worth. Please never appear before him again. Yes. I'm sorry. The call was then quietly ended. I immediately set the number to be blocked on my phone. Susan is usually gentle, but she gets strong when she switches to work mode. This time, she was like in her work mode. I'm sorry for acting impulsively. But I've heard about your ex-wife from you, and I couldn't hold back. Thinking about how she made you suffer. I'm really happy you got angry for me. I truly love that about you. Oh, what are you saying? She had angrily defended me. And she was blushing and embarrassed upon hearing straightforward words of affection. Every aspect of her was dear to me, and I strongly felt that I wanted to live the rest of my life with her. Brenda apparently hasn't divorced Tyler. However, he had to quit his job, and their spending habits hadn't changed. The two of them were now drowning in debt and apparently worked from morning till evening. Their jobs hold no fulfillment. Just working to earn money. For them, it must certainly be a humiliation. I cherish the happiness I have now and am determined to continue walking a wonderful life with Susan. Hey you, stay away from places like this. I was told this by Nick, a supervisor from the same company. Just the other day, I had taken a paid leave for today, and he had already made a snide remark about it, yet here we were. Running into each other unexpectedly. The man standing next to him looked like he couldn't possibly lead a decent life. I wanted to run away. In desperation, I maintained minimal defense, but this only ended up infuriating the man even more. Behind me was my wife, looking anxious. We found ourselves in a dire predicament, but the situation took a drastic turn with the appearance of a certain woman. Later on, this incident would profoundly change the lives of Nick and the Mafia man. My name is Kevin. I am 38 years old, a regular office worker in a small to medium-sized company, and I hold the position of section head. I have a wife who is 3 years younger than me, but we don't have children. Right after we got married, my wife was diagnosed with a disease that led to the complete removal of her uterus. This meant that it was no longer possible for us to have children. I thought living just the two of us wasn't too bad, but after the surgery, my wife was quite distressed and often threatened to divorce, blaming herself for ruining my life. Honestly, those days were like living through hell. But by facing my wife head-on and having numerous discussions, we managed to find peace. Even without children, going on trips together or enjoying slightly expensive dinners made me feel completely happy. Gradually, my wife started to recover, and around the time I was promoted to section head, an incident occurred. Just before this incident, the previous department head had retired. Sitting in that empty department head's seat was Nick. In his mid-40s, he was selected to be the department head, but Nick was the nephew of the CEO, Mr. Yale, who had joined the company through connections. Nick, who believed strongly in educational elitism, refused to entrust important tasks to employees with only high school diplomas, delegating only basic tasks to those with college degrees. Naturally, the less educated employees were angry at this unfair assignment of work, while the college graduates complained about the abnormal increase in their workload. Yet all Nick did was shout, "If you have a problem with my methods, leave right now. Remember, I am the nephew of Mr. Yale." And he showed no signs of listening. Since then, Nick began to decide everything based on educational attainment. When a high school graduate tried to attend an important meeting with a client, Nick would say, "You're pointless. A high school grad shouldn't be sticking their nose into this and arbitrarily make changes." Or when a college graduate helped a high school graduate employee, he would say, "Don't pamper them. You are a college grad. You shouldn't need to help such people." Thanks to Nick's arrival, our department became chaotic, and now someone quits almost every month, leading to an abnormal situation. The reason Nick can continue to be arrogant is that our office is a branch, not the main headquarters. Mr. Yale, his uncle, is based at the headquarters and seems to be abroad often, focusing on globalization efforts. Furthermore, our branch manager, Mr. Harvey, is conservative. At first, everyone complained to Mr. Harvey, but now no one does anymore. Mr. Harvey would say, "Endure it, he's the nephew of Mr. Yale," and wouldn't deal with our complaints at all. That's why, unwillingly, we had to accept Nick's tyranny, and our workplace became a place where hard-working people suffer. Thus, those who work earnestly are the quickest to leave. While we do recruit new employees, the people who could train them have left, so no one can teach them. Even if someone could teach, Nick would say, "Don't learn from anyone but a college graduate," and appoint some college-educated employee as the trainer. Consequently, college graduates not only have a heavier workload but now also have to train new hires, leading some to mistreat the newcomers. This means that the new hires don't develop well, and within 2 or 3 months, they leave, worsening the atmosphere further. Employees who can't leave are mostly those with families. They need money for their children's education, their wives are expecting, or they are paying for their parents' care in nursing homes. Everyone has such circumstances, and quitting at such a time would put their families in trouble. Nick knows this and seems to exploit it. If something happens, he would tell the male employees, "If you run away, your wife and kids will suffer, won't they?" And to the female employees, "In this day and age, no one would hire a woman with kids like you if you leave such a good company." Everyone is looking for a job change, but it's hard to find a good place. And knowing that others will suffer if they leave makes it difficult for them to actually quit. I am one of those people. Recently, my wife and I have been planning something, so I cannot afford to be unemployed. Additionally, our income greatly affects our plans. Therefore, I absolutely have to find a company that offers better conditions and is okay in terms of salary. It's hard to find such a company, and my job hunting efforts aren't going well. This method of Nick's, taking employees' families hostage, puts everyone under immense stress. Gradually, the branch's performance started to decline. Annoyed Mr. Harvey forced us into unreasonable overtime and mandated work on holidays, creating a chaotic situation. I was living amidst this uncertainty. Perhaps due to such a lifestyle, my spirit was considerably drained. But then, unexpectedly, I received a call from someone. It was from my mother, who lives far away with my sister. "Mike's 3rd death anniversary is coming up, so come back home." And isn't Kate's birthday soon? She's always been so focused on the house and hasn't married, always staying single. Let's at least celebrate with just us. Though I had planned to return for my father's 3rd death anniversary, it was surprising that my mother wanted to celebrate Kate's birthday. In our family, the women are quite strong, and usually, my sister and my mother have been at the forefront of everything. I remember my father saying with a laugh that I couldn't hold a candle to the way my mother and my sister efficiently managed the house. Of course, my wife was invited too, and when I checked with her, she was happy about it. So, I replied okay to my mother and had already submitted a leave application at work. As expected, Nick sneered, "Taking leave at such a busy time, huh? Well, there's limited stuff a high school grad like you can do anyway. Do as you like." At least, we had planned to take leave on Friday, fly back with my wife, and meet my mother at a restaurant she had chosen on Saturday night. Then, the day arrived. The traffic's bad, and the taxi isn't moving much. "Sorry, but could you start without me?" Having just received this message from my mother, my wife and I decided to go ahead into the restaurant. We had reserved a private room in the back, but had to pass the counter seats to get there. As we were being led by the staff, a voice called out from the side. "Hey, isn't that you, Kevin? Wondered what you'd do taking leave. A date with your wife in the distant suburbs? I don't mind. But it's a shame the burden falls on other employees. Actually, what's a guy like you doing in a nice place like this?" Turning around, there was Nick, with his usual irritating smirk. I had heard from a colleague that Nick was also going back home or something, and he had dumped his work on others before leaving on Friday. Beside him sat a burly man who clearly didn't seem like a decent person. He scrutinized me from head to toe as if sizing me up. Feeling uncomfortable, I tried to pass by with a brief greeting, but Nick grabbed my arm to stop me. "Wait a minute. Since we're here, let me introduce you to this guy. This is my friend, Tucker, and this is one of my subordinates, Kevin." Not much to show for himself, and just a bottom feeder with only a high school diploma. Before I could say anything, Nick condescendingly introduced me. As Nick spoke, the mafia-looking man named Tucker said, "Oh really? But you dress pretty nice. Looks like you have money, huh? Hey, since it's such a rare occasion, why don't you join us for a drink today? Of course, you're treating, even though you look younger. Well, age aside, you're paying anyway." Feeling a bad premonition, I instinctively protected my wife by standing in front of her. "I cannot do that. I have plans to dine with my family today." As I refused, Tucker's face stiffened instantly. His irritation became apparent as he started fidgeting restlessly. Tanner had a look of exasperation, as if saying just go along with it. I had no time to deal with these guys, so I turned on my heel to head to the private room. But an irritated Tucker said, "Wait," and continued. Don't you see? I'm a mafia, collecting protection money around here. Do you understand what happens if you defy me? Is it okay if something happens to your wife behind you, huh? Tucker's gaze alone was intimidating enough to make one tremble, and for a moment, my legs froze. My wife looked at me with concern and anxiety. I could simply give Tucker and Nick some money to resolve this, for the safety of my wife. But it didn't feel right to yield to such tactics. I struggled to control a strong impulse and responded firmly, "No matter what, I will not comply with your demands." Just as I spoke, Tucker, seemingly reaching his limit, abruptly stood up from his chair. "What are you doing?" A commanding voice echoed through the small restaurant. Everyone's gaze shifted to the entrance, where a petite woman was standing. Startled, I checked the time. About 5 minutes had passed since we entered. Wearing large sunglasses and sporting nearly blonde long hair, she exuded an impressive aura. For a moment, I thought I saw Tucker's eyes waver. Meanwhile, Nick, unaware of who the woman was, shouted at her, "Who are you, lady? Outsiders should keep their mouths shut." Ignoring his words, the woman approached us with the click of her high heels. Then, to me she said, if you're even the son of Mike, you need to pull yourself together. I feel embarrassed as your sister." Surprisingly, I was the one being scolded. Scratching my head, I apologized, "Sorry, Kate." At that, Tucker let out an almost scream-like shout, "His sister?" To Nick, it must have seemed irrelevant that the sister I was going to have dinner with had appeared. But to Tucker, my sister, Kate, seemed to be someone special. He started trembling as he looked at her. Nick was taken aback and asked him, "What's wrong?" Ignoring Nick, Tucker greeted her energetically, "Kate, it's been a while." Kate slightly shifted her pitch-black sunglasses to look at Tucker and burst out laughing, "Oh, it's you, Tucker. I was wondering who dared mess with my brother and sister, huh?" By the end of her sentence, her expression had turned serious. And Tucker seemed only capable of trembling. Nick, still not understanding the situation, looked back and forth between us, but as Tucker desperately told him, "Nick, you better apologize. It's for your own good." Nick seemed to grasp what was happening. Nick slowly apologized to her. She, sighing, turned to Tucker and asked, "Who taught you to be a nuisance to others? Me? Or Mom? Surely not, Dad, right?" Tucker shook his head as if it might fall off, vigorously denying her words. Nick whispered to Tucker, "Who is this woman?" Eyes wide, Tucker corrected him, "How dare you say this woman? She's the underboss of our mafia family." Realizing everything, Nick trembled as he uttered, "Even a woman, and the underboss of a mafia family." This was a sensitive point for her. At Nick's words, her eyebrows twitched, and her face contorted with displeasure. Though Tucker had been pale with fear before, now his face turned completely white. Indeed, as Tucker said, she is the underboss set to take over the top spot of a mafia family. She is actually feared by the members. Typically, men dominate the top ranks of the mafia, and many might have heard of the term gangster's wife. When our father was the head, our mother was that gangster's wife, but after his sudden death, she temporarily became the acting head. Of course, there were calls for me, the eldest son, to be the next head, but I stepped down. Marrying a civilian wife and not wanting to involve her were my main reasons, but I also believed I lacked the ability to lead a mafia family. Despite some insistence on having a male head, it was Kate who silenced them with her capability. She has always been tough, with a strong sense of justice and a deep love for family. She might have been looked down upon for being a woman, as Nick said. Despite being a woman, but she brushed off those words and secured her position. She had faced many challenges, but they only made her mentally stronger, and she is now eager to relieve our mother of her burdens. Now, no one dares to belittle her as just a woman. Everyone knows she dislikes that term, and all members of our mafia family agree that she is the rightful next boss. Tucker repeatedly begged for forgiveness from her, and Nick, having heard the conversation, realized she was no ordinary woman. For once, Nick's arrogance faded, and he trembled noticeably. Then, in contrast to my formidable sister, a carefree voice sounded. "Sorry I'm late. Oh, what's this?" Needless to say, it was our mother. Tucker, regretting messing with me, looked at me with teary eyes. My mother quickly grasped the situation and turned to Tucker, asking, "Aren't you the boy from back then?" It seems quite tense here, but can you explain what's happening? Overwhelmed by my mother's commanding aura, Tucker kept apologizing, seeking forgiveness. To a confused Nick, I explained, as you can see, Tucker is a member of the mafia family led by our mother, the current head, and my sister. The next head. Tanner stared at Kate and me, his teeth chattering. With a sigh, Kate suggested, let's not disturb the other customers here. Let's talk in the private room in the back. Tucker, looking utterly deflated, had no choice but to agree. Nick, having relied on Tucker's authority, clearly lacked the courage to challenge someone who even Tucker obediently followed. He replied in a voice as faint as a mosquito's and followed us timidly. We took our seats and ordered drinks. After hearing some of the situation from Kate, our mother spoke to Tucker in a low, grave tone. How dare you disgrace our family's name in such a place? The worlds of the straight and the mafia are different. You should know better. The usual swagger drained from Tucker as he faced the stern reproach from our mother, the current head of our family. He was profusely apologetic. Next, my mother turned her attention to Nick, who was frozen in place, not moving an inch. Having no courage to fight against them, Nick looked down, sending me a look as if begging for help. I'm sure Nick also believed that I wouldn't come to his rescue. But he knew all too well that it was only now, after he had repeatedly been sarcastic towards me, that he found it convenient. Indeed, the way Nick looked at me seemed less hopeful and more like a faint glimmer of hope. In the worst case, he might be crushed by our family. If Mr. Yale ever found out about this, Nick could be demoted from his managerial position for colluding with the mafia. As the saying goes, the eyes are the windows to the soul. Nick spoke volumes with his eyes alone. I sighed softly and spoke to my mother, who looked like she was about to explode in anger. It's partly my fault. I should have stood up for myself instead of backing down. Both Nick and Tucker looked stunned, as if they had never expected me to defend them, their faces showing a glimmer of hope. Kate then said to me, "Are you showing them mercy?" From what I just heard, that person looked down on you just because you only finished high school and practically humiliated you in public. You're still going to forgive him? Nick, at a loss for words, tightly closed his eyes. Tucker started to look visibly nervous. My mother remained silent, observing the situation. I slowly began to speak, sharing my thoughts. I don't like conflicts. You two should know this best. Don't resolve matters by force but by dialogue, wasn't that Dad's favorite saying? I may not be as strong as you and the others, but I can engage in dialogue. With that, I straightened my posture and looked Nick in the eye. Nick seemed momentarily confused but then returned my gaze seriously. You were anxious, weren't you? Being the nephew of Mr. Yale, you feared not being taken seriously. And your focus on academic credentials stems from your own struggles to pass entrance exams for a prestigious university. While that's an achievement to be proud of, it doesn't mean that all employees who didn't go to college have given up or dropped out. Isn't society about understanding and respecting each other, helping one another? Nick had nothing to say in response. Instead, Tucker spoke up. I'm sorry. I was just bluffing like Nick. I have a sister suffering from a chronic illness, and Kate helped with the medical expenses. I wasn't aware of that. As I looked towards Kate, she shrugged and said, Tucker's sister is your age. His brother was originally a part of our family and was a great ally of mine. So for Tucker and his sister, they're like family to me. I helped out with the medical costs, with my own money and some from our mother. It's my way of returning the favor since his brother always stood by me, even when I felt isolated. While I was surprised to hear about this connection between her and Tucker, it seemed just like her to go to such lengths. My mother also silently approved of what Kate was doing as the next head of the family. Tucker apologized again for his misconduct. Even though I was unaware, I ended up repaying your kindness with betrayal. You said you would cover the full amount. But I'll work and pay it all back. Before Kate and my mother could respond, I said, there's no need for that. Tucker looked back at me, surprised. I continued to express my thoughts. Indeed, what you did could have tarnished our family's reputation. I live in the civilian world now, detached from the family business. But such actions could inconvenience Kate, my mother, and the members, especially your brother. Pausing for a moment, Tucker seemed to take my words to heart. giving me a serious look. I added, "But, you've managed to apologize properly." Normally, one might make excuses to justify their actions. You could easily say that since I'm no longer involved with the family business, it's none of my business. But you didn't resort to such tactics. Instead, you admitted your mistakes openly. I don't think Kate and the others would impose further punishment on someone like that. With that, as if breaking the tension, my mother burst out laughing. I was momentarily flustered, thinking I had said something odd, but then she, no longer as the head of our family but as a mother, said to me, "You're becoming more and more like your father." Normally, I would have to condemn Tucker for tarnishing the family's name. But as you said, he's taken responsibility and apologized. This time, I'll forgive him, for your sake. I was relieved. Honestly, it was almost a gamble whether my mother would let Tucker off the hook. Since my father's death, she has led with unmistakable authority to ensure she wasn't underestimated, resolving conflicts within the family with decisiveness. Kate too had made considerable efforts to demonstrate her capabilities, deeply understanding what it means to be part of the mafia. Whether to forgive Tucker was a delicate matter, but I was relieved that my words had an impact. Tucker, likely never expecting this outcome, teared up and grasped my hand, saying, "Thank you for protecting me, even though I was so rude out of the blue." I slowly shook my head in response to his words. I hadn't really protected Tucker. I had simply stood by my own principles and followed through with them. When I explained this, Tucker, deeply moved, said, "You are my hero," and showed respect for me, even though I'm younger than him. Feeling a bit odd, I asked him to stop saying that. "Please, don't say like that, that's not really my style," I said hesitantly. Perhaps finding it amusing, Kate burst out laughing, dispelling the somber mood. And my mother suggested we toast with some beers that were just brought out. While looking apologetic, Tucker accepted a beer mug. However, Nick, who had been silent until then, politely declined and said, "I need to cool off outside." "Tucker, stay here." Before he stood up and left the restaurant. I debated whether to follow Nick, but finding no words to comfort him at the moment, I decided to let him be. Ultimately, with one more person, we went ahead and celebrated Kate's birthday as planned, enjoying a delightful meal together. Nick didn't return to the restaurant after that. Having completed my father's memorial service, I returned to the apartment where I live with my wife. When I went to work as usual the following Monday, something felt off. The office, which had been frantic lately, was unusually calm and settled today. I went to my desk and asked a colleague next to me what happened, and apparently, Nick had been transferred or something. And someone who came in temporarily this morning was now in charge. Thanks to him reverting the work assignments Nick had messed up, the daily chaos had settled down. We, the high school graduate employees, had been idle for a while, so we started to regain our motivation. Meanwhile, the college graduate employees finally had some breathing room, and 6 months after Nick suddenly disappeared, the department had returned to its previous calm state. One day on my way home, I heard children's voices from the park and instinctively looked in that direction. There, in a suit, Nick was sitting on a bench. I hurried over and called out, "Nick!" He turned around in surprise and smiled weakly. It was a surreal scene, two middle-aged men sitting on a park bench, but I didn't mind and listened to Nick. I've never met someone with a heart as clean as yours, and it made me feel ashamed of myself. Everything you said back then hit the nail on the head. I was panicking, resenting the high school grads for not having it as tough as me, just fueling my own competitiveness. That realization made it impossible for me to go back to the office. He accepted a cup of coffee I bought from a nearby convenience store, and as he thanked me and drank it, Nick's profile looked somewhat lonely. Right after that incident, he confessed everything he had done to his uncle, Mr. Yale, and asked for a disciplinary leave on his own accord. Starting that Monday, Nick had taken voluntary leave and proceeded with his resignation without telling any of us. Apparently, he couldn't face us. He had been job hunting since then, but it wasn't going well, realizing how much he had relied on connections for his job. Before joining our company, he had been living as a part-time worker, having quit a well-known company within a year despite graduating from a prestigious university. Unable to cope with the reality that there were always bigger fish. Worried about such a nephew, Mr. Yale had given him a chance at our company. Lost for words, I hesitated, but then Nick, in contrast to his earlier demeanor, smiled brightly and said, "I've realized just how flawed I am. I can't stay here. I've decided to apprentice under the owner of the restaurant where Tucker works. It's a fresh start, but this time I feel like I can pull it through." Surprised by his story, it turned out that Tucker had stopped his half-hearted involvement with the mafia family and started working as a restaurant chef. That place was a restaurant his sister used to visit when she was healthy. He was determined to make meals for her once she was allowed to leave the hospital or come home temporarily. Of course, Kate hadn't billed him for the medical expenses, but Tucker had decided to save up a significant amount to repay her someday. Inspired by Tucker's actions, Nick decided to join him as an apprentice for his own self-reflection. The restaurant owner was short on hands and grateful for the help, and Nick was set to leave by plane the next day. "This is probably my last time wearing a suit and walking through the city. I sat here because the sunset looks the most beautiful from this spot," he explained. After listening to him, various words came to mind, but what I needed to say to Nick right then weren't words of consolation or encouragement. Slowly, I raised my head and looked towards Nick, saying, "Take care." Surprised by my unexpected farewell, Nick briefly showed a stunned expression, but quickly smiled and replied, "Yeah, I'll be off then. You take care too." 3 years passed. I visited my hometown again and knocked on the family home's gate. Instead of the typical scene of underlings lined up, I leisurely walked down the path leading to the house, taking in the view of the garden. Upon seeing us, my mother immediately brightened up with a big smile and exclaimed, "Welcome back." Then, without paying much attention to me, she immediately turned to my wife and said, "I know it's been tough, but please continue to support him." My wife responded with a smile and handed a precious baby she was carrying to my mother. Carefully cradling her, my mother looked at her peaceful sleeping face and said, "Hello there, Grandma's here." Yes, we had welcomed a new life into our family. Since my wife doesn't have a uterus, this child isn't our biological offspring. Although the child came to us through special adoption, she's already an important part of our family. We had been planning this special adoption for a long time. The screening was rigorous, and there were many couples waiting for a child, so it took over 3 years for our turn to come around. But, having finally been able to welcome a child into our family, we brought them to my mother, who had been looking forward to this moment. In fact, the child's birth mother was from this area, which was one of the reasons we moved here after the adoption. It took a while for us to settle down and for me to feel comfortable showing the child to my mother. But she was visibly overjoyed to meet her grandchild. My wife also gazed lovingly at our child. For me, it wasn't important whether the child was born to my wife or not, what mattered was that this child had come into our lives. And I felt it meaningful to raise her as our own. My mother felt the same, and even Kate, who joined us later and is typically known as a formidable figure in the mafia, wore a gentle smile. Children are remarkable. For the sake of this child's future, I would sever ties completely with my mother and Kate. My wife and I had many doubts about this. After all, it wasn't my idea but one that my mother and others had decided upon. After months of deliberation following the child's arrival, we decided to respect their decision. Thus, today was the first and last day for my mother and others to meet this child. Given the circumstances, we left the child with my mother for a while, and my wife and I went to a restaurant. It was just past the busy lunch hour, so the restaurant was quiet with few other customers. As we entered, we were greeted with a hearty welcome. As we took our seats, a familiar face, now a waiter, brought us a menu and cheerfully said, "Long time no see. Today's special is grilled chicken made by Nick. It's really the best." My wife and I burst out laughing, and from the back of the kitchen came Nick's embarrassed shout, "Stop it. That's not my special." The restaurant owner joined in the laughter, and I could tell that these three had built a good relationship. Tucker's sister was still hospitalized. But she had recently been granted temporary leave and had come to this restaurant to eat some of Tucker's specials. Tucker's dream had come true, and it seemed he now had a new goal: to open a new restaurant with Nick. How these two became friends was still a mystery, but it was clear they were bound by an invisible, strong bond. After finishing our meal and getting ready to pay, I encouraged them, "Keep up the good work." Nick, who once had a troubled expression, and Tucker, who used to tremble in fear, were no more. Both responded with bright smiles, "Yes. Life exists as uniquely as there are people, and if one were to look into their histories, they would find a mix of highs and lows. Feeling that I had glimpsed a part of that, I felt strangely moved. I would now build a life with my newly adopted daughter and my family. With that prospect of future joys, my wife and I left the restaurant hand in hand,